And now, it's time for another Dice Tower review with Ryan Metzler.
Hey everyone, it's Ryan Metzler here again, and today we're going to take a look at an American-style game, a combat game. That game is going to be Warhammer Diskwars. Now, in this version of your combat-style games, they've removed all the minis, so that's a great entry point for me, and I'm excited about that. And I've been looking to get this one to my table for quite some time. I'm glad that I finally had the opportunity. In this box, you're going to get basically a mini-style game. The game itself is going to be played using discs that you're going to move by flipping them end over end, in order to try and combat your opponent or opponents, which is possible with this box. You could probably play up to 4 players if you wanted to. It includes terrain, it includes range markers, it includes all the rules for you to play in several different styles, either the predetermined type of skirmish that they have for the introductory game, or your own style of army building and then playing. I'm not going to go into all the rules of army building, but I am going to describe the general mechanics of gameplay, and then you can decide for yourself. So real quick, why don't we open up the box of Warhammer Diskwars, see what comes inside, and at the end, I'll give you my opinions on it. So here you can see the components for Warhammer Diskwars. We're not set up for play, clearly, but I wanted to show you what comes inside of this box so you could have an idea of what you're looking at. You're going to get 4 different armies, and that's these piles of discs here. We have Orcs, High Elves, Chaos, and then the Empire. So you get your choice of what you'd like to play with. Each of these armies has different sized discs. You'll see that there's a large size, a medium size here, and a small size. And when you're drafting your army, you're going to basically have to draft a number of smalls equal to your mediums and larges, so that you can't have too many big units in your army. Now, each of these different sizes has different types of things going on, but usually the larger ones are going to be your heroes, and they'll say hero on them. Each of these discs will have traits, and this one right here is its movement. This chevron on the upper left-hand side means that it can move 3, which will be flipping end over end to move along the battlefield as you're playing the game. The 7 in black here is going to be the attack value. If it makes an attack, it has an attack value of 7, and this is only in melee combat, not for ranged combat. So if it's the aggressor, it will deal 7 damage. If it is not the aggressor, if it's the defender, it will counterattack with 4 damage. So that's this white value. And then 5 over here is the number of wounds it can take before it actually takes a damage. Now, most things will die when they've taken this many wounds, but you'll see that heroes have a stamina value in the bottom right-hand corner, or kind of towards the bottom. This is how many times they can be overtly wounded or have their shield break before that they're damaged. So they have 2 stamina. On the 3rd one, they'll actually be removed from the game. Down here, you're going to see their command value. This is how many command cards you get to draft when you have this hero, and having command cards is going to be how you play the game, how you activate your units, and we'll cover those shortly. Then at the bottom, you're going to have all of the traits involved, as well as the value of this hero. So you'll see down here that he is a hero, he is a caster, he has flying, which means that he doesn't have to stop when he moves over another enemy unit, and he has frenzy, which we're not going to cover in this video. But different guys will have different traits, so let's take a look at the other hero here. This one here says that he's a war machine. He's actually not a hero, he's just a big dude, and that he has siege, which means that he can make very long range attacks with 2 dice and a d6 for damage. So that's going to be good, and basically this value at the bottom that I showed you on your hero is how many points worth of units you can draft into your army. So 33 points that you can draft after you have this hero into your, basically your regiment that you're going to deploy out onto the field. Other units could be smaller, and this one's actually a smaller hero. The size is really just dependent on how you draft them into your army, but they'll all have different traits. Those traits could be things like mobile, which means they can move and make a ranged attack on their turn, or impact, which means that when they run into something, they do damage to it, and it'll have a value with it. Some may have magic attack, which you can use to make a medium ranged attack to attack somebody, and that value will be based sometimes on the number of units that are around it, or other times just on a static value. I already mentioned flying, or you could have relentless, which means that you can roll over guys as you move through the field, usually having to stop when you do so. So each of these armies and each of these units will have different values. What else do we have here? We have a range marker. Now this range marker shows you what short, being the red, medium, being the orange, and long range are going to be, being the yellow. Anything beyond this is siege, and that's like that war machine I showed you, can make attacks at longer range than that. So certain things are only going to be attacking at certain ranges. You're also going to have markers. These are for dealing damage. Most things have that damage value I showed you. On one side they have 1, on the other side they have 3, and when you take enough damage, you're removed from the play area. These are the stamina tokens that I showed you. For guys that have multiple stamina, they can be wounded multiple times before they're removed from the battlefield. These are going to be empowerment tokens. There are certain heroes can empower, or certain cards can empower other units, which will make them stronger on attacking and defending, and basically is just going to make them overall harder to kill. Finally, we have activation tokens. These activation tokens are going to show when a unit has been activated on the field and cannot be used again. There are some other things like initiative tokens. This is in the 2-player game. Whoever's going first will have this hammer. In multiple player games, there's going to be multiple tokens to show which player is going to be going in what order. You also have dice. These dice are going to be the D6, standard D6. And then you're going to have attack dice, which are for ranged attacks, basically. These different sides will show different values. So for example, this one is scatter, meaning that you're actually going to hit somebody close to you instead of whoever you were targeting at, and it could be one of your own units. We also, of course, have the terrible miss on the X side here. This is just a miss. You have chaos. This will only be affected by units that have an effect that triggers when chaos is rolled. You have hit, which is just going to be dealing regular damage. And then you have critical hit, which will not only damage the unit that you're attacking with your attack value, but is also with your ranged attack value, but is also going to activate them for the turn, meaning that they can't take an action later in their turn. And dependent on what your attack is, you may roll multiple of these dice and resolve all of them. You'll also see we have some cards here. Now, these are going to be your deployment zones. In the basic game, you're just going to get 3 of these, and you're going to play them out next to each other, and you'll have to deploy all of your units basically within the width of those and within medium range of the edge of your play area. On the other side, some of them are going to have different, well, they'll all have different effects. And you're going to draft these like you would any other part of the game, either drafting your army or drafting terrain. And they're going to have different things that they do. So this one says discs that start moving, overlapping this zone, gain 1 movement. So you can change these to have your army do different things or have different advantages based on what you draft. These other cards you see down here are going to be different scenarios that you can play with. For example, with these, if you're playing the full game, each player will get one of these cards dealt to them. And that card is going to basically give them an objective at the bottom as to how to score victory points, which could be score 5 for each enemy hero that you cause a casualty to, removing it from the board. Or score 1 victory point for each enemy casualty. Any person you take away from the board is worth 1. Some of them will be different. Like, for example, we have score 5 victory points per opponent for each of their areas that you've managed, their starting zones that you've managed to overlap one of your discs with. So charging to your opponent's other side could be worth victory points. In addition, you're going to shuffle these and deal 1 out for the game, which is going to give you some type of over-branching event. For example, this one says each general loses 1 stamina, making your heroes, or each hero loses 1 stamina, making each of your heroes easier to kill. Other ones could be, for example, whenever a player places a piece of terrain, he may deploy one of his discs overlapping that piece of terrain. So you can kind of start your guys out on the board. So these will change how the game plays. You're also going to have the possibility of using strongholds, which are a piece of terrain you can place out that when you hold them will allow you to give sieges, or to do sieges and give you victory points at the end of the game, or let you win if you automatically control 2 of them at the end. So those are good too. And then finally, we have these cards here. These cards are going to be how you're actually going to activate your units. When you take a general or a hero, it's going to tell you over here how many command cards you get to use with him, and this is part of the whole drafting rule set that I don't really want to go into too much detail on. But if you have this hero here, he lets you have 2 command cards, and you're going to go through the command cards and choose which ones you would like to have. The value at the top left is going to be how many units it lets you activate. Then at the bottom, they could have special effects. For example, this one says that your hero may empower a target disc within medium range, making them stronger and harder to kill. Or each disc activated with this card gets 1 extra movement. So it depends on which ones you draft, which effects you'll get, and how many guys you'll activate. In addition, they all have a keyword here: steady, slow, devious, and bold. And these are going to choose the order in which these cards activate when you play it against another player. Each player will choose 1 card and reveal it at the start of the round. Bold will go before steady, steady will go before devious, devious will go before bold. So you kind of have a rock, paper, scissors mechanism there. Slow will always go last. So if you choose slow, you're going to go last, but oftentimes they activate more guys. So dependent on how big of an army you're drafting, how many heroes you have, you'll choose more or fewer of these cards, and some of them can only be drafted by specific armies. So you'll see this one right here is orc only. So that's all of that. The only thing you can't see is that we have terrain off of the playfield here, which can be played out there to either give cover or make moving through it harder, whatever the case may be. But real quick, why don't we just talk about how play works. So here we are set up for a quick two-player skirmish. We're not using any of the terrain because it's just going to get in the way. My table's kind of hard to photograph here, but note we could have placed terrain before we started, having things blocking line of sight, having things that are harder to move through or impossible to move through, whatever the case may be. Now, at the start of each round, or at the start of the game, I should say, anybody with Scout, which is an ability, will be able to move before the game begins in initiative order. So we'll see that the initiative hammer here is with the Empire, and they're going to get to go first, and they have 2 scouts. These scouts have a movement of 7. I mean, it's a huge movement, and I'm playing on a much smaller area than we should be. It should actually extend all the way to the edges of my table on both sides, but you can see I've marked it off here with these little tokens that show where the edge of the table is. It's kind of a squared off area, but it could be my whole table, and you could play on a larger area if you wanted to, but they suggest 3 by 3, which is the size of this table. Anyhow, just note that the perspective here is much smaller than it should be. But these guys are going to be able to move first, and anytime you move, you're going to be flipping edge to edge up to a number of times equal to your movement. So this is going to be 7. So this guy could move 1, 2, and you are allowed to move over your own guys, 3, 4, and so forth and so on. He's not allowed to pin anybody on his first turn, meaning that he's not allowed to land on any other discs, stop there and hold them, but he is allowed to move, not allowed to make any attacks. So they could each move out into the field, kind of flipping end over end to show movement and measure distance, something like that. Then the player over here also has one. They have Wolf Riders that could move out and, you know, kind of prepare and maneuver to where they want to be in order to make a ranged attack or mobile attack later. So they've all started the game. After this point, you're basically going to start playing command cards. So each player has a hand of command cards. In the base game, it's 4. And those command cards are steady, devious, slow, and bold. So it kind of gives you the idea of how that rock, paper, scissors mechanism works, as well as the slow, which always goes last. The empires here have different abilities. For example, this one lets the hero empower a disc, making it stronger. This one here is devious. It doesn't do anything special, but it will allow them to activate 4 of their guys. They have Rally, which will allow their hero to remove activation discs from a couple of the units within range and basically make them able to activate again. And then they have one more, which is one of their discs that's activated gains 2 movements, so it allows them to move a little bit further. Our other team here is going to have different cards. They're going to have one here that says all of the discs that are activated with it gets +1 movement. They have the slow one that activates 4 but does nothing. They have Lure, which lets their hero power a disc, and they have Warg, which says that each orc disc activated with this command card gains Relentless. Relentless means that they can move over guys instead of having to stop on them when they land on them, and that's moving over opponents. So in each round of play, each player is going to select one of these cards from their hand to play to the table. Let's say that our player here chooses Myrmidia's Blessing and plays it down to the table, and our other player chooses Warg, and they play it down to the table. So both players are now ready to go, and they're going to reveal their cards simultaneously. We have Warg, and we have Myrmidia's Blessing. Well, they're both bold, which means they tie, which means the player with the initiative marker is going to go first. If this player had played Devious, they'd have gone first and activated their guys before Myrmidia's Blessing, before the Empire. They're going to activate 3 of their guys each, but first Empire will activate, and they get to choose which of their 3 guys out on the battlefield any 3 want to activate. When they do this, they're going to be able to do one of many things. They may move using their movement, and that's basically an entire turn. If they move and they land on top of somebody, that person is pinned and cannot be activated on a future turn. So essentially this is a way to hold them down. In addition, once all of the movement is done, which will be several rounds of card play, these 2 units are going to get into a fight. And you'll see that 3 will be dealt to this unit here. It has damage of 3 and it would be killed, but this unit would deal 4 back. This unit only can take damage of 3 and would also be killed, so they'd kind of kill each other off. Unless somebody were to come by, for example, these archers back here, and fire on this unit, destroying it before that combat took place, because ranged combat happens immediately, but melee combat doesn't happen until after all units have been activated or all cards have been played to the table. So maybe this unit activates, and it does this, and it gets that put out there. Then maybe this unit over here decides to shoot at one of my guys. And it has a range of short. So it's going to see, is this guy in short range? Well, unfortunately not, but he has the ability mobile, which means that he can move first and then attack later. So he maybe flips twice to move and then decides to attack this guy in short range. When he does this, he's going to roll 2 dice. And his dice are going to be at my error boys, which are archers. And he's going to hit them once. In this case, that does 3 damage. My error boys have a damage of 4, so they take 3, but they're okay for the time being. If he had rolled a crit, he would have actually activated my guy, and then he wouldn't be a choice when I decided to activate my guys on a future activation. He would now be unable to activate because he's already been activated once. We would then mark this guy as activated. Now, we haven't been using our extra movement, but maybe one of our guys in the back wants to move a long distance. So this guy can only usually move 5. This one can only usually move 4, but maybe we can move him up to 6 this time because of this card. So he would rotate 6 times, or up to 6, maybe moving in between here and deciding to pin down one of my orc boys. Granted, you'll note that my movements aren't exact because I'm flipping it one-handed and that there's not felt on this table, but you get the idea of the movement. After all 3 activations have been done by this player, we're going to go on to the player who moves second, and they're going to activate 3 of their units much in the same way. Once we've done this back and forth and everybody's activated their units, we're going to put these cards to the side. Then we're going to choose another card from our hand and play them down much in the same way, trying to outsmart our opponent and move first, or maybe sometimes move second in the hopes that you'll kind of have better positioning after your opponent's moved. You're going to continue this until either all of your cards have been played or all of the remaining units on the board have been activated. If a unit takes damage equal to its hit points, or whatever you want to call them, it's removed from the board, so as the game goes on, you'll have fewer and fewer units. Basically, the objective here in this version is to kill more of your units than the opponent over 5 rounds. So you're going to play through, an entire round is done when all of the units have activated, and then once everything's activated, you'll resolve all of the melee combats on the board. If there are 3 guys in a melee combat, like this, they're going to resolve from the top down. This guy will deal his 5 damage to the unit below him. Sorry, yes, 5 damage. Killing him off, but this guy will deal his damage back 4 and also kill him. But that will keep this guy safe because he's never involved in a combat, and that's called a scrum. They always resolve from the top down, and that's kind of a way to preserve your guys or remove other guys and keep certain ones alive on the table. As I said, you're going to play over 5 rounds, so you'll play through 5 melees or until all of the units are removed from the board, and whoever has either units remaining or has destroyed the most of their opponent's units by the end of that 5th round will be the winner. Well, there you have it. That is Warhammer Diskwars, a game that I enjoy quite a bit despite the fact that it is an American style or thematic style war game. I do like minis games, believe it or not, and many people who watch my videos probably think, well, he's not interested in that style of game. That's not true. It's just that the entry level of cost for those types of games is so high most of the time. At one point I played Warhammer 40k and I just got out of it because it costs so much money, and the same is true for Magic the Gathering or collectible card games like that. It just costs so much money to maintain. But in something like Warhammer Diskwars, where they've got cardboard first off, which kind of eases my Euro side into the game for the pieces, and then they also have the fact that it's small, it's easy to get into, and it reduces the cost of playing a miniature skirmish type of game. So huge plus for that right there. The rules are well done. The fact that you don't need tape measures to measure how far things are going to go, you don't need a whole bunch of different dice in order to do things, it's just all very streamlined. Now there are some special abilities on things that make play a little bit different. And each of the different armies are going to feel different. For example, you know, you're going to have your orcs that are going to want to charge in and do things and kind of make sure that they can run over some of the guys. You're going to want, on the demon side of things, to have a guy who can summon guys around him and kind of try and position your guys later in the game rather than try and strategically position them at the beginning. So there's all types of different play that can be taken here dependent on what you want to do. The draft style that you can use in the game in order to build your armies is going to play a little bit better if you have multiple sets. Now that's going to be true for anything. Multiple sets is going to make the game better as long as you can use those multiple sets together to increase your choices. So when you're buying this, be aware that you may want to have more than one set in order to have bigger draft options when you're playing with multiple people on the table. Other than that, I think that the rules are really well laid out, although you will be doing some flipping back and forth to figure out what some of the special abilities on some of these tiles do. So note that you may have to reference the rulebook for your first couple plays, but I think in the long run, the game is pretty easy to understand and pretty easy to play for a mini-style game using cardboard discs. Anyhow, I enjoy it quite a bit. Definitely going to stay in my collection, and it's probably going to be my go-to game to bring out when I want to do some type of mini skirmish like this. So check it out. That is Warhammer Diskwars from Fantasy Flight Games.
Thanks so much for watching the Dice Tower videos. Find more great videos and reviews, as well as our top-rated audio podcast at Dicetower.com. You can also find other great shows at Dicetowernetwork.com. I'm Eric Summerer, and you've been watching The Dice Tower. The Dice Tower is sponsored by Cool Stuff Inc., where you can find great games for great prices. Cool stuff in stock. Check them out at CoolStuffInc.com.